You're listening to Voices of Customer Experience. I'm your host, Mary Drummond, and on this podcast, we shine the spotlight on individuals who are making a difference in customer experience. We also proudly bring you the very best of customer experience, behavior economics, data analytics, and design. Make sure to subscribe or follow us on social for updates. Voices of Customer Experience is brought to you by Worthix. Discover your worth at worthix.com. Welcome to a special episode of Voices of Customer Experience, today, October 2nd, celebrating Customer Experience Day. And to mark the occasion, we've invited a special guest, a brilliant man who is well known and loved in this industry, design revolutionary Max Israel. Max is founder and CEO of Customerville, creator of the design-driven customer experience management platform used by companies in over 20 countries. At Customerville, Max leads an innovative team who blend technology, art, and behavioral science to make customer feedback process engaging and actionable, both for customer and employee. Customerville has come to be known for aggressively pushing the limits of what people can expect from customer experience surveys and reporting. Welcome to the show, Max.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
I'm joined today by James Conrad, co-hosting with me.
Hi, Mary. Great to be here.
Wonderful. Max, for those who are not familiar with your work and what you do, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background, what you started off doing, if you accomplished that which you set out to do initially, and then ultimately what your goal is, what your mission is in customer experience?
Absolutely. So my name is Max Israel, and I'm the founder and CEO of Customerville. And what we're really known for is this concept of design-driven feedback. Design-driven feedback has at its heart this idea that you can only really make CX work and measuring CX work by mixing great technology, of course, with art and behavioral science. You want to make this a fulfilling experience for the people who are sharing feedback, but also a deeply fulfilling experience for the employees who you share it with. That's been a 15-year mission for us. Oh my God, guys, I feel old just saying that. But 15 years of trying to transcend the paradigm of CX measurement.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I know that one thing that you're famous for, let's say, is your vlog, 40 Billion Reasons Why. And this title, 40 Billion Reasons, it's on your website as well on Customerville. Can you explain a little bit about that concept and how you came across it and what you're trying to do with this concept?
Yeah, great question. And so I'll tell you two things. The first is that, at one point a couple of years ago, we tried to get our arms around, one of the things that's important to Customerville is challenging this assumption that when you actively seek feedback, that you're engaged in an active data collection, right? Most customer surveys are horrible. They look like filling out your taxes online in the Soviet Union or something, right? They're really, really bad. And the question, we started asking, why do we accept that? That you would never, those surveys break every rule of how humans seek information face to face that you've known since you were 3 years old. Why do you accept that? But then somebody brought up this point, how often does it happen? And we realized we didn't really know. So we worked with some colleagues of ours at GMA Research, some friends of ours at GMA Research, and we came up with a number. And it turns out that at that time, Americans alone were asked for feedback via a survey 40 billion times a year, and nearly all of them were terrible. All of those experiences were just horrible. So from our point of view, it creates all kinds of problems. The fact that you ask for feedback in ways that create the impression that you don't really care, you're not really listening, creates all kinds of collateral damage in terms of how customers perceive the brands that go down that path. And also just kind of this idea that it creates the impression that companies are really only interested in your money, that they'll spend billions of dollars when they're trying to get your money, but when they want to actually listen to you, they'll put only a token effort in. That's a problem. And we think from our point of view, that's 40 billion reasons why we ought to try and make the act of listening at scale using technology ring with the same kind of authenticity that you would strive for in any personal relationship that you have. And that's how we came up. So that's the backstory on 40 billion reasons. 40 billion reasons is draws from this notion of 40 billion surveys. The backstory on the backstory is that later, as we've had other people challenge that number kind of humorously and give us a hard time, saying the truth is it's probably very significantly larger than that. So the problem. Yeah, but at this point, we've already kind of owned up to this 40 billion number, so we're running with it. But the truth is,
I think it's a big enough number.
What else are you going to do? It's daunting enough. Like at some point, a gazillion, or we're going to use gajillions or something. Like at some point, it's just a big freaking number that we all agree is wildly wrong, right? So that's the name of it. I'm glad you liked the vlog, by the way.
Oh, I love it. It's great. You did a great job. Just the production itself is wonderful, but the message that you get across is great. And it's one of the things that brought us to you. But an observation, I think you're so right in that sense that you have these companies that invest, I don't know how much money, I'm going to say millions just for the sake of putting a number to it, of dollars in creating an identity, a visual identity, and to get this notion out that they're disruptive, that they're innovative, and all of that. And then when they finally, talk to their customer, their survey doesn't look like that at all. It looks like something institutional. It looks like something that's boxed in. It looks like something totally old fashioned. And it does, like you said, destroy the identity that the company has for the customer in the customer's mind.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely right. And I hadn't stopped to think of that.
Yeah, it goes, I think, beyond just old school and old fashioned. We wrote, this concept of design-driven feedback, that we coined that term, and that, that's kind of what people associate with Customerville. And we wrote a book on the subject, which we cleverly titled Design-Driven Feedback. So that was maybe not our most inspirational moment. But there's a chapter in this on something called breaking the fourth wall. Have you ever heard that term, guys? It's a theater acting. It's a theater acting technique. When you're watching a television show or a play, and at some point they kind of break the paradigm and they look and talk to you directly in the audience. And I think
sure.
Yeah. Have you? So I know that Kevin Spacey has become a controversial figure, but my favorite example is actually the show House of Cards. Have you guys ever seen where the president's character
he turns to the camera? That's right.
Yeah. And so here's part of the problem. It's not just that surveys look old-fashioned and that the problem is, we need to make the UX slicker and easier and put some pictures in there. That is not the problem. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of companies think is the problem, but it's not. The problem is that when a company like General Motors or Starbucks or whatever spends not millions, billions of dollars to develop their brand, that brand and all of the hardworking professionals in the company whose job is to look after that brand, right, is targeted at selling to you, right? So let's talk about General Motors for a minute. General Motors, the brand is tied up in their company logo, their colors, their fonts, the images of the cars, and the way that they want you to perceive yourself when you own a General Motors vehicle. And all of those things are going to be consistently and beautifully executed through the experience when they're advertising on Super Bowl Sunday. When you walk into the showroom, it should look like that. When you have their brochures, it should look like that. That should be a seamless experience. Here's the problem. That wonderful brand fails completely when it's time to listen. When it's time to talk to the customer, putting the company's logo or the photo of this season's car or whatever on the survey to make it look more like the website, more like the app, actually seems like the right thing to do, but it's not. What you need to do is break the fourth wall, very much like a theater actor would break the fourth wall on the script. And instead of featuring pictures of the car or whatever, picture features of the employees behind the scenes, right? And tell a little bit of their story. These are some behavioral science cues in terms of what you do in your personal life when you're seeking information. You don't just roll up to somebody and ask them questions. You're going to do a series of things first to set the stage, and then they're going to open their hearts and open their minds and tell you things. That is a very different application of the brand, or let's call it maybe a modification of the brand, than every other use of the brand. And so that is the problem, guys. The problem, is not that they just need the survey to look slicker and more modern. That is what companies, with all due respect to our friends at like Worthix and those companies, that's what they think the mission is. And they've got $500 million in venture money trying to get them to do that. But it's not. With all due respect to them, that's not the problem.
If you want to understand more about the science behind customer decisions, follow our blog at blog.worthix.com or find Worthix on your favorite social media. Getting your CX project off the ground? Start with the right foot by downloading our CX guides, ebooks, and playbooks on worthix.com today.
I'm wondering as well, as some of our listeners are hearing what you have to say around design and in the survey, and they're probably thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to go back now and look at what we're asking our customers and how it looks. What have you seen, tangibly in the difference where you've gone into a company and you've designed something and seen how the feedback has changed, or you've gone in and built a survey from scratch? What have you seen with the customers you've worked with when you've elevated the experience in terms of generating feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question, James. There are a couple of things that you should see that are tangible and measurable, and then there are some things that are measurable but maybe a little bit harder. So let's talk about the first set. One thing that you should see is that people. We have this thing we talk about in the book, and we've got it coming up in season 2 of 40 Billion Reasons, called the Black Tooth Test. So the Black Tooth Test is a lot of fun. Have you guys read the book?
No.
Not yet.
Oh, God, we got to send you copies of this, because if you both read it, that will be like 15 people who've read it.
Okay.
Did you guys see the movie The Hangover 2? There's that scene where the American humorist Edward Holmes, I think his name, Ed Holmes, is missing a tooth. And it's just funnier than hell. It's funnier than hell, right? It's actually, you know what? That's not CGI. He had a tooth that he was interested in having a crown he was interested in having replaced. So he went ahead and had that thing removed, and they shot it without that tooth. So we show a picture. That is commitment, brother. In the book, in the Black Tooth Test, we show 2 pictures of the American actor Ed Holmes at the time he was shooting the movie The Hangover 2. In one of them, he has all of his teeth, and the other one, he's missing a tooth, right? And what's interesting about this is we challenge you to cover the picture where he's missing the tooth and look at this picture. And Ed's a good-looking guy. He's an all-American looking guy. Looks very clean-cut. And look at it and imagine that he's asking you, hey, guys, I'd really like to take you, Mary, and you, James, out to lunch and pitch you on an idea. I've got something I've been thinking about. And think about how that would make you feel, right? And then we ask you to clear your mind, take a few moments, and then cover that photo and look at the one where he's missing a tooth. And we Photoshop the photo so he's wearing the same clothes, respectable business clothes, but he's missing a tooth, right? And ask yourself the same question. And 100% of the time, people say, try as I might, I can't ascribe the same level of credibility. Even though I know it's the same guy, there's something about that missing tooth that makes me instantly discount everything he says.
Even though the person knows they're being tested on top of it, right? Which is
you're in a test. You're in a test, right? And the problem with that is that you are hardwired over millions of years, 3 million years of evolution, to effectively kind of score credibility based on a whole host of things that it's incredibly hard, maybe impossible. Even though you know what's really going on, it's very hard for you emotionally to change that calculus. You're going to score people for credibility, based on a certain set of things about how they look and how they act and how they treat you.
Yeah, I do that with eyebrows all the time. Like if a person has questionable eyebrows,
they're out. They're dead to you. They are dead to you. Okay, so here's the problem. That's right. So what's the problem? The problem is if the survey acts in ways that violate the social that kind of social compact around how people talk to each other, you cannot help but discount credibility and authenticity of the brand and the people behind it. Try as you might. And as a consequence, you're going to go through that survey faster. You're going to give less useful information. You're just going to do what people would naturally do. You're going to invest less emotional, you're going to invest less time, less emotional energy into being thoughtful about it. So that's a problem. But when people get the survey right, when they get it right in terms of the design and how it flexes and responds in human ways and how it tells the story of the people behind it, what happens is that the eyebrows are right. The teeth are right, so to speak. I'm metaphorically speaking, right? And so you're going to see that people take more time in the survey. They're more thoughtful on each page about what you're asking them and how that makes them feel. And you're going to see things like comments. You're going to see more comments and more thoughtful comments. And those are both easy things to score, to see the difference on. We had a chat with a big national department store chain. And one of the things you can do in a Customerville survey is you can upload photos and soon video and stuff like that. And some of our competitors have issues doing that for technology reasons. They can't really do that very well. But one of them was able to upload a photo button, and this department store chain said, we tried it. Nobody does it. Nobody wants to put the photo in there. And our view was, guys, photos have become a new kind of language. People use them 100 times a day in every form of communication possible. They're not doing it in your survey because you haven't sold them on the idea that a real human is going to see it. So you're wasting their time. They just think, why would I upload a photo that goes into a server? That's ridiculous, right? So again, that's another example where when you get that the form of the survey right, such that it's transmitting this human connection, it's creating a human connection, people will do all kinds of wonderful things that they won't do in a survey that fails those rules. And those all accrue to the company's and the brand's benefit.
Yeah, I love the concept, Max, and I can see the value in getting some really rich feedback by using some different techniques, as you've talked about. I know you use NPS and some other metrics, and you talk about it on your website. When you're thinking about metrics and things that you want to see move in relation to action, do you ever see any bias in having things designed very differently from company to company? I can see the value for sure in the feedback section, but how about metrics when we're trying to look at things quantitatively? What are your thoughts on the application design as you're trying to think about also some consistency within the company on a metric, or even if you're comparing companies within an industry, for example?
Yeah, we get into all kinds of trouble about that, James. I think it's a misguided discussion. It's a horribly unproductive discussion. James, when I woke up this morning, I showered, I shaved, I put on a fresh shirt. You did too. We all did these things because if we didn't, we ran the risk of failing the black tooth test.
Okay.
Right? Do you see what I'm saying? And so, the very idea, and the fact that our industry comes from research, which unfortunately today, as research has kind of evolved into the technological advances and the methodology of VOC, voice of the customer, we have unfortunately taken with us this antiquated notion that how we ask for feedback needs to be sort of aseptic. And that by injecting any notion of humanity into it, we run the risk of biasing the answers. Guess what? You bias the hell out of every answer, every question you ask in human-to-human conversations all day long.
Agreed.
Right? And so the notion that we need to be careful to avoid a bias is, with all due respect, it's completely misguided. I'm going to bias the living daylights out of every answer people give us. What we want to do, though, if you're not careful, what you can do is you can create a bias that avoids the truth. If you're willing to push to the point where you're not just biasing, but push a little harder, maybe sometimes a lot harder. And this is where we get into sometimes hot water, and we have to do what I call cocktail diplomacy with the brand people in a company. You need to make the survey not just create a human connection with the employees behind the company, but a connection that is so authentic that people are willing to tell you the truth, even if the truth is painful. And you need to give people in the survey the design and the form, both in terms of how the technology deploys it, but also, frankly, the creative in the survey needs to give people needs to express the power of vulnerability, right? We acknowledge we don't do everything right. I wake up every day trying to make this company do all the right things. But let me just tell you, I know right now out there somewhere we're doing something that isn't right. And so it's okay for you to tell me that. If you do that, then you kind of push beyond this notion of bias and you get to honesty.
Well, it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're using these very traditional methodologies like NPS, for example, but you're trying to do more with it. You're trying to provide more than just a number for the board. You're trying to actually go beyond that and get into the human part of it. So maybe perhaps the whole argument of BIAX, et cetera, doesn't really matter for what you're trying to accomplish with the responses you get from customers. Is that right?
That's exactly right. NPS, though, with all due respect to our friends who use that number, is something that's kind of going away. A lot of our clients aren't using it anymore. But and I want to just say two things that'll get me in hot water, but I'm just going to say them because they're true. One of which is, I think NPS has value to some extent as an overarching metric that can be used at the C-suite level in terms of benchmarking, but it's in no way useful as a frontline leadership tool. What we need is, let's ask ourselves, what do we need? We need to know that we have a grasp on the things that really count, right, in our customer experience. But frankly, even more important is that 100,000 employees of a company are being thoughtful about that they're thinking about it. And I've come to the conclusion that it almost doesn't matter what metric we show the employees. What matters is, we have this concept of the self-narrative gap, which I can tell you a little bit about if you don't already know about it. But this idea that if you're making employees inspired, that counts. You can trouble them. You can show them information that inspires them, which is great. But frankly, I'll take trouble. If I can show them information that makes them concerned about their company and their job in the right ways, I'll totally take that. What I care about is that on the drive home from work, they're thinking about it. Because if they're doing that, then they're being conscious, mindful. They're thinking about how their actions shape the impressions in key moments with those customers. That's the real thing, right? And that has nothing to do with Net Promoter. Those metrics being kind of going down the path of metrics are vitally important, but they are not the be all and end all. The be all and end all are the best companies and the best brands have authentically engaged employees. And you don't get them there by winning their heads. You get them there by winning their hearts. And that isn't done through a metric.
I was about to bring that up. When I watch your videos, when I watch you speak about your mission and what you're trying to accomplish, I feel a lot of heart. There's a lot of passion in that. And I see that when other members of the Customerville team speak about the company and what you guys do as well. So I feel like what you're trying to do is include heart and passion and emotions into a very metric-oriented industry. Is that it?
Yeah, it's like a recipe for losing a lot of RFPs, basically. If you're in the right culture, and we're not here to be everything for everybody, right? If you're in an RFP situation, our clients, just to talk a little bit of inside baseball with you, our clients are not small businesses. They tend to be mid-sized and large enterprises, right? And as they go through, I think, Mary, you mentioned a little bit earlier, kind of the long-term evolution of the CX movement. As you kind of look at that, many companies have kind of come up the learning curve and tried version 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and they tend to come to us at the point where they're looking for 3.0. They've figured out how to get these metrics, how to distribute them broadly throughout the organization, how to use them, but it's still not delivering or certainly warranting the very large investments that they're making in them, right?
Right.
At the point where they realize that this is really only going to reach its potential when they're able to turn this from a data collection exercise to kind of a storytelling exercise that gets their employees deeply engaged, and that's what's missing. That's where we win, right? That's where we're the right fit. I shouldn't say win, but that's where we're the right fit, right? Before that, we're kind of not the right fit. And so when we show up and talk to a company and we see that, these guys have metrics breath, right? That's a good sign that we need to be talking really directly with them about what we see as a trend that probably was very prominent several years ago, but now is on its way out, and why. And if we can connect on that, then great, we're a good fit. If not, we want to be really careful about not letting them get too wowed by the cool stuff they see in Customerville without understanding if what's at our core is a fit for them.
Worthix is disrupting the market research industry with cutting-edge technology and a revolutionary methodology. Visit Worthix.com to learn how we're using artificial intelligence to improve customer experience at companies like Verizon, Jeep, Blizzard, HP, and L'Oreal.
And thinking about frontline employees and how we get information to the right people within the organization, you have this concept you talk about, publisher versus the postman, and it resonated with me. Could you talk to our listeners a little bit? And most of them will be CX folks that are trying to think about how to get the right information to the right people in the organization to make change and to drive change.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the concept and how our audience can sort of capitalize on some of these ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just let me say, James, that we're at a point right now where some of the technologies that are becoming available, inexpensive, and readily available to all of us, including CEOs like you and me, who run the companies that provide this infrastructure, are putting us in a new kind of golden age of CX. And I'll explain what I mean by that and by going from being a postman to a publisher. Really we've come through, and we talk about this in our book, Design Driven Feedback, that CX has gone through two phases, or I should say it's gone through one phase, it's in the second, and we see it going to the third. It started in what we call the portal phase, where people realized, hey, gosh, we can replace these paper surveys with online ones and have all the information instantly available in a portal for us to analyze, which is great.
Right?
Yeah, that was great. And then we went into the dashboard phase, which is where mostly we're stuck right now, where we think about this as a many to many relationship, many surveys coming in, and then people talk about this idea of putting the right information in the hands of the right people at the right time, which is another way of saying we're going to load into this dashboard the hierarchy of the company, and we're going to have some permission-based access to it. So people are seeing the right information that pertains to them. And that's been a big deal. We were a huge part of that, right? Unfortunately, it fails in one critical aspect, which is that it assumes that all people at the same level of the hierarchy are motivated by and driven by the same things, and they're not. So what we want to do is go from the portal phase through the dashboard phase and into what we call the publishing phase, right? And this requires that companies embrace this notion of curation. They become what we call a curated CX enterprise. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is if you look at how let's use the example of magazines. We talk about this in the book, and we also talk about this in our vlog. Look at how magazines target their audiences. And I think we used a couple of examples like Men's Health and Cosmopolitan, and you can kind of pretty readily identify who are their readers, right? And then you look at how the publishers who've done a wonderful job of gathering this information, gathering these stories, now turn the focus to the reader, to the audience, and they ask themselves, how can I package these stories and make a whole lot of editorial decisions and design decisions in ways to get them to really bite on these stories, to engage? Heck, they'll pay. You pay to engage, right? That's how hard they want you to bite on this. So instead of just saying, hey, listen, we've got a whole, let's say you've got a company who's got call centers, right? And we're going to make sure that all the people who are on the phones get the same report, and then all their managers get another report, and their managers above them, maybe group managers, get another report. Let's push beyond that and acknowledge the fact that at the call center level, one person sitting in one seat's worked there for 5 weeks, and the person next to them has worked there for 5 years. One of them is a man, one of them is a woman, one of them's on a company-sponsored management track, the other one is not. Right? These people are vastly different. And if you can understand that, and by the way, you already have that data available to you, you can start to curate the stories and that you're gathering through your CX initiative and deliver it to them in ways that are optimized to get them to look forward to receiving it and to think about it and be thoughtful. You're essentially, a lot of this, by the way, is very similar to the automated curation that you see in social media and Facebook or LinkedIn, right? They are mastering there are kind of 3 levers that you pull to make that happen, and they've mastered it with social media. There is no reason why we shouldn't be applying this, and at Customerville we do, to how we deliver this, going beyond just pushing information to the hierarchy and go to curating it at the individual recipient level.
Is this the behavioral science that you use in your company?
Yeah, that's a part of it. I mean, there's some of that, but the curation techniques are kind of known in the world of. We talk about it on our vlog, and I can talk about it to you briefly here. But essentially, what you want to do is figure out, how do I give the software enough information that it is, obviously if the survey is crappy, you're going to get crappy information in, and that's not very useful. So when we talk about going from being a postman to a publisher, the postman, collects an envelope and doesn't care how, it's just not his job to care, how good the information in the envelope is. And then his job is done when he drops it in the mailbox, but it's also not his job, and he doesn't really care whether or not you read what's in it, or whether you're thoughtful about it, or it inspires you, or any of those things. But a postman has to go beyond both sides of that equation. Postman doesn't just the publisher doesn't just collect information. The publisher needs to make sure that the publisher collects the information, yes, but he needs to make sure he's getting the scoop. His journalists need to get you to open your heart and your mind and provide this great story, right? And just like the postman, the publisher needs to get information to people, but he has to go beyond what the postman does. He can't just deliver it. He's got to make sure you read and engage at an individual level. And so from our point of view, there are kind of tricks to making sure, there are techniques to making sure that you're training the software to make those editorial decisions. And once you've got these great stories and statistics and photos and videos, that you're putting the right ones in the right way in front of people at an individual level, not just based on where they are at the hierarchy. That's the brass ring. That's the next objective in this entire industry.
It's brilliant.
It's only brilliant if we can do it.
Yeah, of course. As we're winding down, Max, I also, you've been doing this now, you said 15 years you've been on this mission. As you look out into the future and thinking about where CX measurement is going and survey metrics, et cetera, what do you think the next big thing is? What do you think's coming? And as you look to the horizon, as you mentioned earlier, what do you see for CX as we head into the future?
I think that from my point of view, the future of CX is the future of the employee, EX, right? CX measurement is, from my point of view, a tool to activating the employee experience. And I think people don't talk about that enough, that there's really no substitute for, very, very much more often than not, there's really no substitute for deeply engaged, really, you kind of almost in your face, they're so into it employees. You can't replicate that. That is the number one, number two, and number three thing, right? And it's really remarkable how important that is. And everything that you guys do and that we at Customerville do should be in the service of creating a powerful, authentic, and for heaven's sake, productive emotional connection between all of those customers out there and all of those employees. I want you to create employees that have a spring in their step. If the employee of the company is at their kid's soccer match Saturday morning and somebody says, "What do you do?" I want you to think about how the person feels at exactly that moment. If they look at their conversational partner and say, "I work for a car rental company. I work for Hertz," whatever, and then they move on, that's not good. If they look at him and they feel a little swell of pride, and they feel something like they feel valued, socially of value, right? They feel like they do something important in people's lives. That is the brass ring. And frankly, only we have the ability to make that connection really happen. This is an incredibly important part of company cultures. But can we just stop talking about the money and the business and all that for 2 seconds? Think about the consequences in society. Think about the consequences in people's lives of making people feel like that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Max, this was a great conversation. I think that there's so much to learn from what you're saying. And to be honest, it's refreshing because it's the first time that I've heard a lot of the concepts that you went over. And I'm just really glad that you were here with us today. And I hope to bring you back more often so we can continue this conversation.
This has been a lot of fun. You do a wonderful job. Thanks for the compliment on our vlog, 40 Billion Reasons. But I have to tell you, you guys do an amazing job yourselves with this podcast, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with all of my colleagues at Customerville and all of my own contacts. It's a wonderful resource, and thank you for doing it.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to add the links to your vlog and your material in the episode details. And in case our listeners want to follow you and want to speak to you and listen to more of what you have to say, how can they find you? What's the best way to reach you?
LinkedIn is the best way. I'm actually, I think I might even have an unhealthy relationship with that LinkedIn app. So I respond instantly to messages on LinkedIn, and you can follow me on LinkedIn. Season 2, like you guys, we have a kind of a summer off season. Our season 2 starts. I think Henry, or my colleague Henry, will kill me for not knowing this, but I think it's like first week of September. And so you can sign up for that at customerville.com/vlog. And also you'll just, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you get the updates there too.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today, Max.
Yeah, thanks, Max. This was fabulous.
Mary, thank you. James, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Customer Experience. If you'd like to hear more or get a full podcast summary, visit the episode details page or go to blog.worthix.com/podcasts. This episode of Voices of Customer Experience was hosted and produced by Mary Drummond, co-hosted by James Conrad, and edited by Nick Gomez. Blog copy and summary by Emma Waldron.